And welcome everyone. So basically, the Burchfield Penney Art Center it was called the Burchfield Museum. Charles Burchfield um, is an American watercolorist. Um, Fascinating mixture of kind of bleary-eyed visionary and heartland Americana, combining kind of the American regionalist realism um, with the transcendentalism of Thoreau and other naturalists. Basically, he focuses on the land. It's like um, Grant Wood's pastorals on LSD. Okay, they're very hallucinatory pieces, as you can see from the one that's up here. Bright colors, a lot of energy, um, really interesting character. This Burchfield guy. Um, so I'll do a little background to begin with. Let's see. He was born in Ashtabula um, Harbor, Ohio. His father died um, when he was about 5 years old. So they moved um, from Ashtabula to Salem, Ohio, and that's kind of where he grew up. Um, he actually graduated from his high school as valedictorian, so he was a bright guy. Um, let's see. Okay, we'll go here and I'll give you some more background on him. He spent a lot of time walking the woods and looking at natural phenomena when he was a child. He um, made a practice of taking a sketchbook out with him and drawing out in the woods. And every time he came across a plant that he'd never seen before, he would sit down and draw it. Um, he was very compulsive about this. In fact, let me see, what did they call this stuff back then? Um, yeah, he roamed the woods and open fields. Thematically, he returns again and again to close observation of natural phenomena for his inspiration. The weather effects, plant growth, decay, rhythms in nature, mainly working in watercolor and mixed media. He was constantly drawing and making written notes for himself. Um, in fact, um, let's see. Okay, here's a self-portrait on the left. He was quite accomplished. Was didn't do many portraits, but this is a really you know beautifully done piece. Um, so a- as a teen, he had what they call brain fever at that time. Basically, it was a manic kind of obsessive quality that came over, and now they would call it manic depressive or whatever. But that was one of the places where all that focus on the detail of the things that were growing out in nature. Burchfield was essentially a pantheist. He probed the mysteries of nature in an attempt to reveal his inner emotions. An artist must paint not what he sees in nature, but what is there. To do so, he must invent symbols, which, if properly used, make his work seem even more real than what is in front of him. He followed this artistic vision until the end of his life, creating some of his most mystical works. Um, so basically, he was looking at that phenomena in nature and trying to capture the energy of what that was for him. Um, he also was, I believe, he had synesthesia also, which is the business of hearing color. Um, so there's a lot of this sonic business that's mixed in with his work. Um, So let's see. I'm gonna go back to a little bit of bio stuff at this point. Um, he um, he worked at a factory for a period of time. After graduating from high school, um, he went to the Cleveland School of Art, um, and when he was there, he really studied the museum collection that was out there, which had a lot of Chinese painting, and they also had modernist work. So he got to see Cézanne and Van Gogh, and um, he would have been exposed to Caspar David Friedrich, the great German painter, very romantic, very mystical images. Um, those really affected him. He won a scholarship um, to to the National Academy of Design in New York, but he got there, and after one day in class in there, they were sitting around drawing from casts of the human body and all that, and he just said, "This is not for me," and left. Um, he stayed in New York for a period of time, though really never felt at home there. He did he was there, in 1916, so he would have seen a lot of what was really the contemporary art world at that time. So American modernism would have been something that he would have seen a lot of. Okay. And when he returned to Salem, he went back to, working from nature and getting out there and drawing every day and painting. Um, he was also, when he was at Cleveland, was influenced by um, Dow, uh, um, Arthur Wesley Dow, who was uh, basically a teacher who worked at at Columbia University in New York, but he also was responsible for the Asian collection at the Boston Museum. So he integrated a lot of Asian thought into his teaching techniques and into what he had to say about abstraction. So he taught a number of the great abstract painters. Georgia O'Keeffe studied with him. Agnes Pelton. Um, there's a half dozen, and Burchfield was affected by his. I'm not sure if he studied with him directly, but he was definitely influenced by his thought about abstract form. And you can see here, um, this is a piece by Dow, and you can see how, there's a very Asian feel to the piece. It's very open, calligraphic. This is a woodcut, um, and on the left you see a Chinese painting, um, and the focus on the detail and the spatial relationships between the flowers and the foliage and all that. Very interesting layering. Um, Today was a wonderful morning. The blue sky was so clear and fresh that it seemed to resound, and the hot, bright sunshine dazzled the eye as it fell on the fresh green trees and bushes and grass. The breeze was brisk and cold. I was about to say it was a fine June day, but such days are peculiar to no particular, to no solitary month of the year. They come anytime and always unexpectedly. About mid morning, we all, except Jim, who was working his garden, went to Hope Cemetery and put flowers on our grandparents' graves. Snowbells, snowballs, and lilacs had been added to my wildflowers. So here you see, this is actually one of his practices that I'll talk more about. Um, he would work on a piece and then let it sit and then add pieces of paper to it. So the piece on the right is really the center of the piece. Let me see if I can get up the zoom here. Let's see. Uh, Zoom in so you can see. Basically, you can see where the paper is on this piece. So basically, that center portion of this painting was painted in 1955, I believe it was. Let's see. Yes, 1955. And then the other pieces were added onto it, and he mounts the whole thing on board. Now, he worked with watercolor, but he also worked with gouache and charcoal and chalk and all kinds of, so they are mixed media pieces that he would work up in layers. Um, on on the left is a painting by Bodo Shanran, who is one of my favorite Chinese painters. And you can see the world within world that was being created by Bodo Shanran, and that same kind of layering of worlds of of texture and distance and nearness and intimacy that's in the Burchfield. Really interesting stuff. Beautiful piece. Um, and really, again, this close observation of nature, the essential forms, obsessive study, um, a set of, he would develop this set of symbol, and I'll talk more about that. But basically, you can see the piece on the left is a piece from his teenage when he was out there really trying to get everything down. Um, the drawing on the right is a study for fireflies and lightning, which is a painting from the 60s. Um, but you can see the through line in these pieces, that this um, fascination with shapes, with natural form, and how he integrated that. And here is Georgia O'Keeffe, who around the same time was doing the same sort of thing. This going out into nature and trying to look at natural forms and abstracting off of those natural forms, and that kind of rhythmic business that you see in these pieces. They were really contemporaneous. Okay. So he was really not alone in this pursuit that he was about. But here we have um, um, 1916, 1919. Um, you see this kind of bird and chicks inside this hollow log, but it's a very mythic kind of quality that he's giving to these forms. Um, okay. And here we have the motifs that he developed. He had these sketchbooks full of these kind of symbols, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, but there's this kind of fear. M equals fear and anxiety, and there's this shape in the center thing, which is the M. Um, uh, so the painting, church bells ringing, rainy winter night. um, I'm gonna go back for a second and say, basically this period of time between 1916 and 1919 were really what he called his golden years. They were the most productive time in his entire long career. And he actually took many of these pieces from 1919 and integrated them. As I showed you before, he would add pieces to them and expand the size of them, and go further and further into expanding the feel of the piece. Um, this kind of dark, brooding painting, uh, the church bells ringing, um, really recalls Burchfield's sense of fear at the sounding of the church bells in his childhood. This kind of mixture of the darker emotions and ecstatic joy is a through line in his work. And as I said, I'm not gonna go through all the symbols, but he takes these symbols and integrates them into his landscapes. And we may or may not know what those are. Just like in Chinese calligraphy and Japanese paintings, there are the poems that are painted into the scrolls, um, and we don't always know what those things mean, but the shapes have a a a meaning beyond themselves. They do they are read along with the visual information that you're getting from the landscape that you're looking at. And here's some more, another sketchbook pages. of these symbols that he's playing around with and developing. And John Marin, who was a mature painter when Burchfield was still in college, um, was really a forebearer in modernist America, and Burchfield admired him. It was definitely part of his development. Um, so here we have this fabulous, um, ecstatic uh, sun and snowstorm, and again, um, note that it was started in 1917 at 19 and a half by 27, and it was expanded. And I don't have the date when he actually finished it, but it was expanded out to 36 by 48 inches. So somewhere in there, if I pulled up the zoom, we could probably find the edges of the earlier painting, but not that important. What is important is how he worked these things, which is pretty amazing. I mean, watercolor, transparent watercolor, um, you can overwork them and kill off the piece, but basically his technique was to use transparent and opaque watercolor, chalk, uh, all kinds of different things mixed in with the painting. And often he would pull it off without killing off the vitality of the piece, as is obvious here. Okay, and so this is um the kind of regionalism, um uh that kind of realist stuff did affect his work, but still there's a kind of haunted quality to these paintings. Um, it's not just straight up naturalistic renditions of those buildings. They have a quality to them that, as I said, haunted. Um, there are also these energy lines, in the piece on the right, the song of the katydids, whatever the heck they are, uh, on an August morning. Those little squiggly lines just indicate that they're kind of like indications of sound. Um, and again, watercolor, gouache, graphite, colored chalks, and pastels. Ah, so um, in in 1918, the war was on. He was drafted and did not see action. He went down south, I believe it was Carolina, where he was stationed, and painted camouflage to be used out in the fields. So that was really what he did during the war years. Um, Continued to paint on his own while that was going on, and in in 1920 or 21, I think it might be 1921, when he took a job designing wallpaper. He married, and actually began having children. Let me see. Sorry, I dropped my one of my sheets. Um, Basically, they started having children. He married um, uh, what was her name? Uh, Bertha Kenrich. Uh, and she was from Ohio. They moved to Buffalo, and in 1921 he took the job as an assistant designer at a wallpaper factory, and you can see one of his wallpaper designs on the left here, uh, kind of crammed full of stuff. And I wouldn't want to live with that wallpaper myself. So I'm not sure how successful he was at wallpaper design, but he did stay in this job for 8 years. He and basically was promoted to manager of the production design. Um, and let's see, he had four daughters, all born, between 1923 and 1926. His son was born 1929. So basically, he came from a large family. Also, his he had five siblings. Um, he worked that job for a good long time. Now he was having success as a painter. Also, he was selling his work, but not enough to be able to really afford to quit and focus full time on painting. In 1928, he began to develop ulcers, which is what his father died of. And his wife, Bertha, said, "You got to quit this job. I want to keep you alive. You got to get out of there." So he went to um, a dealer that he had been working with in New York, um, and asked him to give him a salary for a year, and then give him a show at the end of that year. And uh, the dealer said yes, and so he left the job at the factory and went to work, and basically had his first show with that gallery. Full, basically had been showing with the gallery, but he did a one-man show, and that was successful in 1929, which, Lord knows, the timing on the economy was pretty dicey. So the fact that he was able to sell was pretty amazing. And in 1930, he was the first, I believe, I'm not sure about the dates on when the Museum of Modern Art opened, but he was given the first one-man show by an American artist at the Museum of Modern Art in 1930. So this guy's, pretty solid on his career track. Um, the interesting part about the guy is, he's living in Buffalo. It's out of the mainstream of what um, what was the art center of America, which was New York. But he managed to make a living and had a good reputation. Basically, I can't remember when the date was, but they Life magazine, which was the internet of the day, um, had the 10 best painters of America, and he was included in that issue. Um, so Charlie did pretty well for himself along those lines. Uh, so we have this piece, and this is an oil painting, which is uncommon for Charles Burchfield. He did not do a lot of oil paintings, and this is a pretty good one. Really quirky, odd, you know, but but interesting piece. And here is his friend Edward Hopper. Um, and notice the structure of this drugstore in the East Village. And let's go back. Let me go back to oh, let me go back to this. And if you look at that little store on the corner, notice the configuration with that pillar in the end. Now, I don't know if Burchfield saw this painting, he may well have, because they were working with the same gallery. And here they are. Let's see. Um, the dealer that made the deal with him is the second one from the left. Frank. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Rain. Um, was the dealer. He was also an artist, but he ran a gallery and so he's the second one seated from the left. And if you look at the standing figures from the left, the second one in, that's Edward Hopper, and from the right, the second one in, sticking up in the top there, that's Burchfield. And this watercolor I threw in, it's from Reginald Marsh, another kind of fairly well known at the time realist painter. Um, but you can kind of see the flavor of what was going on, very earthy tones, well painted. And this is a Burchfield, and this is one of the things that would have been, shown in the gallery. And you can see that kind of. I didn't pull out a lot of these that he did in this kind of regional realisty vein. I'm not as fond of them as I am of his crazy visionary stuff. Never knows about these things. He loved to roam around out there in the woods. And when he was a kid, he may have figured out that mushrooms can do something other than just sit there and pop up out of the ground. There's definitely a psychedelic element to his more developed work. When you look at this thing, there's this kind of multidimensionality. There's this, you know, it it really is in motion and in action, an April mood. Um, Again, you can see, the developed painting and then the pieces that were added onto it. I love these pieces that are partially finished, that are kind of open and have this possibility. They kind of have this energy to them and activity and possibility. Um, So you get the idea of him expanding the scale of the piece. It's really it's a very exciting piece. Uh, I tell you. So it went on from 1946 to 1955. Um, a lot of his work is like that. He does it and then puts it off to the side and then comes back to it and revisits. Uh, and the piece on the right is very heavily worked. For me, it's a little overworked, but hey, That's just me. Um, but this is again one of the ones from 1917 that he reworked and added paper to in 1949. You know, one of the things that is talked about is his experience in the wallpaper factory and his not being afraid of adding pieces of paper to the pieces of paper. You know, he learned a lot about how to make make things work that way while he was spending those 8 years in that factory. The piece on the right is a detail. It's a life-size detail from a piece from 1965. And I just wanted to put that in there to, you know, show the how much more breathing room there is in some of these unfinished pieces, quote unquote unfinished. I don't know that they really are. I think that he was happy with them in the state that they're in. And here's the man painting. The interesting part is he painted upright, which for many watercolorists they try and paint them flat so that the water the watercolor won't drip down the surface. He used a rather dry brush technique, um, and let's see. Yeah, you know, so basically when he's using gouache and things like that, it's a very sticky. It's not like you're running watered down washes over things. A lot of this is, you know, he used very little water in it so it wouldn't run. Um, and again, he's working into it with chalk, with charcoal, with all kinds of different things. He would put things in, he would take them out. You see this set of brushes over here, and you see how the set of brushes in the middle there and actually over to the right are all like, you know, there's not much bristle left in them, so you can tell that he was scrubbing away at the surface, getting things off or moving things around. Um, Really interesting. Okay. This painting embodies the accumulation of the culmination, excuse me, of the artist's aspiration to completely embrace two seasons within one painting. August dominates the forefront of the painting, and a calmer glimpse into the quiet landscape of September is visible through the glowing portal. Burchfield filled the painting with insect, cardinal flowers, asters, thistle, some of his favorite flowers, all seemed to vibrate with energy. In his journals, Burchfield invented a language for insects and birds. In an August journal entry, he wrote, the countless songs of shorthorn grasshoppers whose seemed to embody in the sound of the whole season, its heat, light, and odors. This is a phenomenal piece. I mean, that portal into another world out there. Uh, and I will talk more about this, but animation and actually comic books we're all influenced by this kind of energy lines that are in these paintings. He had been at it for a long time, and this really got into the culture. Okay, and speaking of energy lines and vibrations, um, everything vibrates with energy. You know, it's the singing wires, this these kind of pterodactyl bird shapes flying through the sky. This giant bird cloud that's up there in the dead center of the painting, flying through. Really interesting. And the one on the right is kind of this ghostly feel to it, the wind harp. Uh, Again, very much about sound. The sonic element is part of his work. He loved music. He listened to Sibelius and Beethoven and classical music a lot, and tried to integrate that kind of rhythm into his pieces. So, the dark ravine, uh, white chalk, watercolor, white chalk, um, charcoal, underdrawing. Um, as closed in and claustrophobic as this one is, the dusty road in July is open. Um, okay. Burchfield revealed in his journals, Sibelius's Symphony Number 4, in his creation of Sun and Rocks, much colder in the night, cold, damp wind from the north, tasting of snow, long sweeping layers of clouds with cold white rifts, the glad white rifts, forerunners of the sunshine about to about to break them. So this painting began um, uh, in one way, but actually, what was it? The Peter Bird, I believe. Yeah, Song of the Peter Bird was the 1918. By the time he had added pieces to it, which is 40 by 56, the Peter Bird's gone. Peter's gone. There's some other strange little dark bird flying in there. Um, uh, this wild fantasy hill, uh, very interesting. He had been an atheist, agnostic, as I said, pantheist. Um, his wife kind of converted him to some religious order or other, but still in all, and this kind of frost thing that appeared, but in the dead center of it is this kind of eclipse. Uh, so interesting combination of things. Okay. These cutouts in the center of this piece into a kind of another dimension busting through, really interesting. uh I love this piece. Puttering, a wood thrush has come to our yard. Very unusual. This is such a fresh little painting. Those big black brush marks. 1950, and it's relatively small. It's 12 by 18 for him. That's a pretty small piece, and I'm sure that at least some of it was painted plein air, but just a lovely little painting. Okay. Retreat of Winter. So on the left hand side of the painting, you've got this stream coming forward, and there's a in dead center is this flower blossoming, But if you go over to the right, we're in this frozen area. There's snow embankments over there. You know, given the fact that the guy was living in Buffalo, that kind of phenomenon I'm sure would happen. Um, because they get plenty of snow even today. Um, so, uh, dream of a fantasy flower. This is 1960 to 66. He died in 67, so this is a late piece. Um, Watercolor with wiping and scraping over off-white wove watercolor paper mounted on millboard support. So, you know, again, I'm sure that there are pieces that are added on and all that, but the interesting part, he was a master at using these tonal shifts. So, you know, basically there's all the way up to white, the gray, and the black, and then rather simplified coloration in a lot of these. There's this yellow, red, and this violet, bit of green, but you know, it really is, you know, this range of tonal stuff that supports the color. Uh, Here's some more of those kind of quote unquote unfinished beauties, um, allowing that linear element to just be there. And you know, I don't know if he considered these finished pieces or not. If he'd stuck around for a few more years, maybe they would have been painted on and pushed further. But I love them in this state, and I would I would guess that he did too. Okay, and as I said, animation was very profoundly affected by him. I looked at this piece by Burchfield on the left, and actually, oh, excuse me, wait a minute, um, and immediately thought of Fantasia. And you know, Fantasia again, you got this music and you've got these very colorful scenes. Uh, you know, that this piece on the left is way over the top. And worked up for a good long time. It was 1949 to 1960. Big piece, 56 by 48. Okay. Uh the this the distant boom of thunder, really really beautiful piece in my opinion. It um again pieced together. It's joined. Um the layering of watercolor. It's just plain watercolor and pencil. I think there's some gouache in there too, because it does seem to have that kind of opacity, especially in the yellows and the white, that white streak that's acting as the lightning flash. Um, from 1916, a a cool morning, a hot, windy noon, stagnant evening. Thunder thunderheads loom to the far east. A wonderful hazy moonlit night.
Larry,
I
there's a question.
Yes.
Uh, whoops. Uh, uh, and I scream. What else? Where else is his work exhibited besides the center? And how well is he known?
Oh, he's very well known, and he's held
Yeah.
his
I can-
work is in the Metropolitan, the Whitney. There's also oh God, there's a gallery that represents him in New York that does shows of his work all the time. Um, uh, and the name is escaping me at the moment, but when I remember, I'll give it to you. Um,
um,
so yes, he's in collections throughout the United States.
well, some of his work I think is beautiful, but
Yeah.
some of it makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, good. That he would feel very comfortable with that.
Somebody
I'm
wanted to
very
know, I'm
yes.
glad.
Go
What
ahead.
period is he associated with?
Well, he worked from the late teens through the late 60s. So he died in 1967. Um, the peak of his career was from 1930 through the 60s, really. Um, so an extraordinary career. He really did have good good representation throughout his life.
Was it he an expressionist? That's what somebody was interested in.
Yes, he would be considered an expressionist, especially in those darker emotive states. But even these ecstatic pieces that we're looking at now, there's a kind of expressionistic. He wanted to keep pushing himself. He didn't want to get comfortable. He could have stuck with things that were safe and did not. And
Hmm.
that's an admirable quality in the
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah. Somebody wanted to know, knew the gallery, DC Moore Gallery. Is that where his stuff
DC
is?
Moore Gallery is one of the galleries that carries a lot of his work.
Okay.
There is another gallery uptown that carries a lot of his work. They always have good pieces. As a matter of fact, I have the catalog from that gallery, and I'll tell you the name of it. Hold on a second. Be right back.
Nobody could say that Larry's not efficient. You have the
Um,
gallery catalog.
the name of the gallery is Quest Royale, and they
Quest as in
always have
QU?
what? Yeah,
QUEST?
it's QUESTROYAL, and they're uptown. And as a matter of fact, let me see if I can get this to. Nah, I can't get it to focus. But this is a catalog from a recent show, and there's a Charles Burchfield in there. Um,
Anyway, someone commented about the painting on the right, and they said
yes,
it looks like dandelions.
yes, exactly what it is. That's the name of the piece.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah.
There was an
Um,
article in the Times about dandelions being one of the most important flowers that we have in the United States.
really interesting.
They
I keep
supply
trying to
food
pull them
and
out of my
all.
lawn.
They supply food and habitat for animals. They were really very hardy, obviously, as we all know.
Oh, cool. This tree on the right also, there's this Van Gogh business in that one. I mean, you get that moon up there. This could have been in part of that show that they had at the Metropolitan last year. Uh, okay, and here's the man. So, um, this is
Just
this
okay.
is going to be the last talk that I'm going to do until June. We are having our annual open studios on June 1st in Peekskill, June 1st and 2nd, that weekend. And I am also part of participating, helping to execute a public art project, which should be up and at least part of it should be up and open by the time we do the open studios. So there'll be a lot to see. I
In
want to
Peekskill.
invite all you to come in Peekskill. Yes.
Yes, yes, Peekskill is going to be a happy place. And also in the summer, they have a wonderful outdoor concert, don't they?
They have a
one
bunch
big
of
one, yeah,
outdoor concerts, yes.
bunch, okay. By the way, somebody mentioned about the dandelions that supposedly have a lot of nutritious value if we eat them.
There you go.
I
Just
do
do-
know people who would hunt dandelion leaves. I've
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah,
Anyway, this is not a science class, so I'll stop.
there you go.
So, all right. Thank you all. I hope we see you at the May 17th program to hear Tariq El Aris talk about his book, Water Over Fire. Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.